Um, in February this year, I asked a number of questions in Senate estimates, the economic Senate estimates, where I'd called the Tax Practitioner Board to come and give us some information about Mr. Pettyjohn Collins. Pettyjohn Collins was a senior partner in the tax division of PwC Australia. But it wasn't in that role that he was paid to do anything. He was actually invited in as an Australian citizen with deep knowledge of the taxation system by the former Treasurer, Joe Hockey, to come and assist in the crafting of really good laws to make sure that Australians benefited from multinational companies paying their fair share of tax for the business and profit they Australia, which every Australian would be on board with. You know, we all have to pay our pay-as-you-go tax. You know, small businesses manage it. There's very little leeway. But these big businesses, and we're talking, you know, Google, which is now a matter of public record that they were one of the recipients of the advice, were getting advice from Mr. Pettyjohn Collins, who'd taken that confidential information back to PwC, and instead of finding a set of titanium professional walls locking him out from using it, he found a fertile garden of people willing to jump on board with him and create a product to sell to the largest and richest companies in the world to help them avoid paying their tax in Australia. It was such a big scheme, they even gave it a name, and they called it Project North America, and it involved PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers Global. So the US, London, Dublin, the Netherlands and Singapore, in this massive chain of emails about how they were cooking up the scheme, how they were interacting quite intimately with the then government, and how they were actually planning to make a great deal of profit from this particular scheme that they devised. When that came out in 144 pages of emails, everything changed because the denial that had been their practice before committees until this point was no longer able to hold water. And the truth on the record means that the scrutiny that needs to be applied to these very secretive partnership structures has begun to occur. So we've had a period documenting that, getting it on the through the FP&A committee, which is the Finance and Public Accounts Committee of the Senate. We've been able to get some more information through Senate estimates. And in the coming months, my committee, the Corporations and Financial Services Committee, with my colleagues, has adopted unanimously a set of terms of reference where we're going to have a look at what needs to happen structurally to respond to this, because it goes right back to the beginning. The fundamental importance of audit is critical for the proper functioning of the markets. And every Australian now, because of great Labor policy, every Australian who's working and has worked has superannuation. And all of the decisions about where that superannuation is invested, whether it's retail funds, industry super funds, or a SMSF, relies on accurate information about what's going on inside companies so that proper financial decision investments can be made.
And this is the power of the Senate, isn't it, really, to examine these things that seem to, well, in this case, get right out of hand without it. And this is how this is the job that you're leading in this regard.
Well, I'm so glad that you've focused on the actual capacity of the Senate there, Dave, because a lot of people find what we do quite mysterious. And I think in recent times, people losing faith in institutions, now also losing very significant faith in these big corporations, means that we've got to find the things that we trust. And Australians have trusted royal commissions, and it's kind of become a natural thing that if there's a problem, we'll refer it to the Royal Commission. Well, royal commissions really need to be the very last line of defence. They cost an awful lot of money to implement. While we have the Parliament here, the Senate is called upon to review. It's a house of review of legislation and of practice and of the government of the day, and we can see of the historical reactions of the governments to things that have happened. So I am really pleased to be able to use, all mind, body and soul in my role as a senator to work for the Australian people, along with my colleagues, to get to the bottom of this particular matter, because it matters to all of us that audit functions properly. And when audit is in decline and we're finding up to 33% of audits are not being done correctly. At the same time that those businesses are growing a massive pipeline of business within the public sector for profit and growth, there's a mismatch there that puts all of us at risk, and that has got to be sorted.
And the Senate, again, I mean, to try and put some sort of value on it, I mean, this is the fundamental review process that the Senate goes through. How much money are we talking about here as in this singular case? So I'm not talking about the dozens of cases that you normally deal with, but in this singular case, how much money's up for play for the budget of the the Australian government?
Well, there's two bits to that. In the last 10 years, between the state and federal governments, $10 billion has gone to the Big Four. So that's a lot of Australian taxpayers' dollars that have gone to the Big Four. We know that in 1 year, most recently, it would have been 55,000 jobs that was expended on consultancy. So, we've really got to change that. We need the quality of people in our APS. So that's one side of the money. The other side is we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars potentially lost if PwC got away with this fraud. The real twist in this story is that not long after they provided this product to the market, the ATO saw very swiftly how it was being implemented. This wasn't the only scheme. There were about 11 schemes, according to the ATO, that were perpetrated. And they wrote a general notice, right? That's what they do first. They will give a general notice to everybody, pay attention. We've been noticing some strange behaviours. Is there anything you need to tell us? Then they sent individual letters to the Big Four, and they got a very differentiated response. 3 of the Big Four, so EY, Deloitte and KPMG, came back and said, well, the game's up. Looks like the ATO are onto this. Yes, we'll cooperate. We'll give you all the information so that you can recover the proper tax. PwC decided on a very different strategy. They decided that all their communications with their clients, they would wrap with a thing called legal professional privilege. And they were abusing, in fact, legal professional privilege to prevent the ATO, acting on behalf of the Australian taxpayers, from seeing anything of these big companies in the way in which they were trying to avoid tax. That became a very, very big problem. But some smart person at the ATO figured out that they couldn't put privilege over their emails, and that is how those emails came to light originally. And
that's how the public found out, I mean, really, or your committee work and so on, found out about the extent of the problem. It was massive. And where are we going now with it? It's gone a bit quiet.
Well, the ATO weren't actually able to do what they needed with that information. They involved the AFP at that point, but they couldn't do much. So they sent it on to this other little-known group called the Tax Practitioner Board. And it was the Tax Practitioner Board that found out about it. As this has become more public, the Tax Practitioner Board have been much more able to bring matters to light. The Treasurer has also instructed the AFP to undertake a further investigation, and we're told there are tens of thousands of documents that they will now have access to. So it'll all come home to roost, Dave. The facts will be revealed. There will be a very costly investigatory process, which is such a shame. These are companies that have their name written in lights across the skyline of Sydney. They have incredible market power, but they have unbelievably important responsibility to act professionally and in the common interest. It's great to make a profit if you're a business, but profit taking at the cost of your fellow citizens, that's not on.
It's so stunning in its audacity in many regards. How long do you think this is going to play out? I mean, it sounds like this is going to go on for some time before there's an absolute resolution. And the second part of the question is, will it be business as usual? I mean, will these companies be indulged or engaged, should I say, in the future in the same way?
Well, no, it won't be business as usual. It's already not business as usual. PwC have suffered significant reputational damage as their practices, now documented, were revealed. And they've actually decided to sell off for $1 to an international venture capital company their whole government-focused consultancy business. So that basically cut their arm off and said, we're selling this. It's been bought by Allegro. We're going to call it Skyne, and we've put a judge, Justice Greenwood, in charge of the ethics and trying to manage that. And they are trying to clean themselves up and make themselves suitable to be able to propose themselves and put themselves forward to undertake business for the government. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen, but that's a process that's underway. So PwC's business model in terms of government contracts is forever changed. That is the beginning of what I think will be a realisation by other companies that this business model that they are operating to, which has seen this massive growth in government work, is not going to be sustainable. There's too many conflicts of interest that are not able to be managed, and too many conflicts of interest that are being revealed day after day after day by ethical people within those businesses, and also by public servants now who are starting to have a much closer look at how the system has been gamed. And there'll be more to come out about that as the saga unfolds.
So the three of the other big four too, you're saying this will change the game basically, and your push in particular to re-engage people to work directly for the public service, I take it.
Yeah, well, that was Labor policy going into the election. We knew that the APS was being hollowed out. I mean, the reason we have a public service is because there's actually a national interest. It's not just about job creation for our own citizens, which is one great outcome, but there's a national security dimension to the privacy. I mean, given the geopolitical realities that we confront, a very strong public service is a really important thing for our national security. And given how freely this information was flowing around the world, you can see that these corporates, you know, they're not national entities acting in the national interest. We need to act in our own national interest, and we need to manage our information as a nation in a way that benefits the entire nation. So there's a real significant imperative in terms of rebuilding the Australian public service, and that was one of the things that we were elected to do. That was our platform. The other thing is, internationally, there was an attempt with a project called Project Everest by Ernst & Young to begin the separation of these businesses, because I think they're reading the good companies and the strategic thinkers in those companies are reading the tea leaves, that conflicts of interest absolutely cannot be managed. And sadly, they have become a part of the success of their business, because when they go in and find information they shouldn't know, they've been sharing with other parts of the business. That's becoming more and more overtly known. So EY didn't complete Project Everest, which was a separation of the audit business from the consultancy business. We'll see where that goes. I think that process is going to be very likely to restart, and then the others will follow suit. And in the meantime, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, the Finance Minister, Katie Gallagher, the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, and the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, put out a press release indicating significant work that's going on, 8 action items and reviews and processes that are underway to get the full shape of what's happening. That'll line up with the work that my committee will do, and we'll undertake significant review. But in terms of tax take, I can let your viewers and readers know that if these companies try to rip off Australians going forward and damage the tax base for the nation so that we can pay for the things that we need, like the infrastructure that we so desperately need for the coast, and proper healthcare and proper schooling. If companies try to basically rip us off going forward, there will be fines. Instead of $7.8 million, the fine per instance has increased to $780 million. So there's a massive disincentive now for these companies to continue to provide this sort of tax advice that they were selling when Mr. Peter John Collins took the information from the Australian public, cooked it up, turned something for his own profit.
It's amazing what a committee hearing can do, and thanks for sharing it with it. One last thing to go global. Do you think that this is going to affect, the way these companies, or in fact how governments interact with these companies around the world? Is there any indication for that?
Yes, there is. So recently I self-funded a trip to, I was invited to a forum on national security, intelligence and financial services as a very critical part of that in London. I took the opportunity to take some meetings there. This has been covered all over the world, Dave. In South Africa, they're covering it, in Korea, in London and in Dublin. And I met with an Irish parliamentarian who chairs their Public Accounts and Audit Committee. Sadly, this reality is now documented in a book called The Big Con by Maria Mazzucato and Rosie Collington. And if people are interested, that's definitely worth a read, because it'll give you the idea of this model of land and expand, where these companies get into government. I think we're on a pretty good wicket here. We're guaranteed to get paid. They expand their footprint year after year and ultimately hollow out the public services of every nation where they're undertaking this practice. Clearly, that is not a sustainable practice, and it is not in the interest of global stability and the rule of law.
Absolutely. And to bring it back local, a lot of this, at least the thinking of this and the machinations of this, have happened partially out of your Erina office here on the Central Coast, I take it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. It's wonderful to have amazing people who want to work in politics. So often it's maligned, but we have a great country. We have a very dynamic and effective democracy, and we have great people who want to work in the public service and do good things for their fellow citizens. And I'm really proud to have a great team of people working with me, some on the coast, some down here in Canberra, and we do the very best we can with the resources we have every single day to make a difference for Australians. And that's why I'm investing all my time and energy in this work, because I know that every person who has superannuation, they don't think about it every day, but when they need it, it needs to be there, it needs to be growing, and that shouldn't be put at risk by big companies that make our superannuation investments less stable.
Well, look, thanks for speaking with humble Central Coast newspapers on the Central Coast. I mean, we've got a good, loyal readership, but I think people will appreciate the fact that some committees do an amazing job.
Thanks. And hopefully that builds some more trust in our great institution here. The Parliament is a gift to the nation, too often maligned. We shouldn't let cynicism break it. Be hopeful. Let's do the work.
And I noticed that people can, of course, come down and watch the machinations of the Senate and the House at any time, can't they?
Oh, of course. These are public hearings. They're available through the parliamentary website if you don't want to do the trek. But these are public hearings that are held most frequently, in this case, in the Parliament here in Canberra. But that committee, the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services, we make sure we take it to Melbourne and to Sydney, where there are big financial services, so that ordinary Australians who are interested can come and see the Parliament in action, not too far from where you live.
That's great. All right. Well, that sounds like a day out. All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us. Okay. All right. Bye.